Why do lenders hate working with first-time home buyers? Well, I know hate, it's a strong word, and they don't really hate working with first-time home buyers. It's just that they prefer not to. Now, what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about usually more on the loan officer level, the individual, as opposed to banks. Banks love first-time home buyers because for them, it's all about just putting money on the bottom line over the long term. On the other hand, loan officers, when they're working with first-time home buyers, a lot of them struggle because it just becomes one of those things where you go, how much money am I going to make as a loan officer working with a first-time home buyer? And I want you to understand this, because if you do, you can leverage it to your advantage. Let's take a little look here. So if I come over here as a first-time home buyer and I'm going to get a $500,000 loan, let's say, the numbers are irrelevant, and this is all just for illustration purposes, so to help you understand. Let's say, for example, that particular loan officer, what they normally charge to do a loan is 1% or 1 point, right? So that would be $5,000. You go, okay, well, that's what they're gonna charge for it. That's cool. What are they gonna do for that $5,000? Well, what they're gonna do is they're gonna do a lot of paperwork. They're gonna have a lot of staff, underwriters and loan processors and other filing people and other services, escrow companies and title companies. They're going to kind of manage this whole thing to help you get into your house so that they can do it. And this is going to happen over a period of who knows how long until you actually buy a house. It could be a month. Fantastic. But I know, for example, in the past, I've had clients that I've worked with for 9 months before I ever got paid because it was just they couldn't find the right house. Things were changing. Oops, they got another job. Oh, a credit thing happened, stuff like that, right? So if you think about it, somebody working for 9 months or even just 2 or 3 months, because the typical transaction takes 30 to 45 days minimum after you've found it and gotten into escrow, for them to get paid, $5,000 to do that and have all the staff to cover everything is not an unreasonable request, right? But on the other hand, when you come over here and you go, well, okay, here's somebody else getting a loan on what we would call a traditional loan, right? Same thing. And that loan officer says, hey, we're going to charge you 1 point or 1%, again, $5,000. Well, if the current rate right now, let's call it 6%, okay? Again, these numbers are irrelevant, and they're not even remotely accurate. I'm just doing it for illustration purposes. So take it for what it is, 6%, okay? And this is what would be called the par rate, okay? So in other words, there's no cost and there's no additional earnings on that rate if that loan officer sells you that rate. Because what is it that loan officers are selling you? They're selling you money. Well, there's a cost for money. And if they sell you a loan that has a lower interest rate, there's a cost to it. It costs that bank, that institution, money to buy that money to give to you as a loan if they do it as a lower rate. So what do? They have to charge you more in fees, right, in order to cover that cost. They're not going to pay for it. On the other hand, if they give you a higher rate, well, they've sold that rate, and on the back end, they might be able to get another, let's just call it an additional 1% or 1 point because they sold you a 6.5% loan, okay? So in this particular case, this loan officer made $10,000 on a traditional loan by selling a 6.5% rate. Well, in first-time buyer programs, a lot of times, most of the time, those first-time buyer programs have very strict limitations where they can only make a maximum of a certain percentage, and usually the ones I've seen are 1%. You can make 1%, and that is all. Well, there's the good part to that and the bad part to that. The good part to that is that, well, now you're, number one, you're only paying a certain fee, and you're going to be getting whatever that current rate is. Okay, so you get the best rate available at the lowest fee. The downside to it is in the perception of the mind of the person who's doing this loan and everything that's involved, they're not going, man, we're, making a lot of money on this deal, right? So they kind of put it as a secondary priority to give you those particular loans. They cannot charge you an extra fee or a higher interest rate in order to get more money to make it worth it for them to do. And this is why a lot of loan officers and lenders will not work with first-time buyers if they don't have to. They probably will if they are forced into it. And I know you're sitting there saying, oh, those greedy bastards. I knew it. They all want my money. But again, think about it. They're working for, months with no pay. They don't get a salary. They don't make a dime until the actual transaction is closed. If it closes, this is part of the challenge that a lot of loan officers have to deal with, is if it closes. And first-time buyer transactions are more notorious for not closing than your typical move up or move down purchases that, an experienced buyer seller might be involved in. So that also weighs into the decision of making sure that, they don't get stuck doing a bunch of work and never getting paid for it. Think about it like this. If you went to work and you said, and whatever your job is, you went to your job today and they said to you, hey, we can either pay you the same money you're making now, or we can pay you double the money. You don't have to do any extra work. You do exactly the same work and make twice as much money. What are you going to say? You're going to say, heck, yes, absolutely. There's nobody, I don't care who you are, you're not going to convince me that you would say no on that deal. Everybody wants to make more money, and especially if it's the same amount of work. Well, in this case, for a lender, it's the same amount of work to work with somebody who is a first-time home buyer versus somebody who's not a first-time home buyer. Now, one of the other challenges that you run into as well as a first-time home buyer is that you might try to go get qualified for a first-time home buyer program, which could involve grants and down payment assistance and other benefits and perks just for being a first-time home buyer. But a lot of loan officers will try to push you out of that first-time home buyer loan into more of a, we're using the word conventional, and it may not be conventional. It could be just a regular FHA or VA loan or something like that, where they can maybe charge you or earn more money by giving you a higher interest rate or just charging you higher fees or something like that. And that's, in my opinion, that's kind of a disservice, because we have first-time buyer programs so that you can benefit. So how do you make sure that you don't get taken advantage of? Well, there are lenders that are out there who are first-time buyer specialists. This is what they do, and they're okay with only making the 1% or whatever that fee is that they're allowed to make on the transaction. And the reason that they're okay with it is because two things. Number one, they do more volume. They're known as the specialist in that first-time buyer arena, where everybody else is kind of more just, all over the place. They'll do whatever comes along. They're a specialist, a first-time buyer, so a lot of the real estate agents will send them their clients to say, get my clients the best first-time buyer program, and they do. And they're also okay with it because they know some people who come to them as a first-time buyer, it doesn't make sense for them to use a first-time buyer program where there might be a better conventional program, and then they do get to make a little bit of extra money on it, right? So they are usually truly looking out for the best option that is out there. Look, if you're looking for a great lender who is a specialist in first-time buyer programs, we know a bunch of them all across the country, regardless of where you're at, who this is what they do. They are first-time buyer specialists, and we can help connect you with them if you like. Just go to firsttimehomebuyerprogram.org, fill out the contact form, and let us know what you're looking for, and we'll try to make that connection for you. All right, hey, I hope this was helpful to you guys, and hope it made it a little bit more clear on what to expect as you're moving forward. So now you know what to do. All right, we'll talk to you soon.